house had stood alone for decades, its towering Victorian frame rotting beneath a storm-heavy sky. The air around it was thick, like it was waiting. Its broken windows glowed faintly, as if something inside stirred, watching from the darkness. The surrounding trees twisted unnaturally, their leafless branches clawing at the mansion like desperate hands. No one knew who had lived there last, no one dared to find out. But tonight, someone had come. Inside, the darkness was alive. The long, dimly lit hallway stretched endlessly, lined with faded wallpaper peeling from the walls. Old portraits hung in the silence, their painted eyes tracking every movement. A candle flickered weakly at the end of the corridor, its glow barely holding back the encroaching shadows. But something was wrong. The shadows moved, not with the flickering flame, but as if they had a will of their own. The staircase loomed ahead, its once grand structure now rotting with time. Each step groaned under unseen weight, the wood creaking as though someone, or something, was walking ahead just out of sight. At the top, a figure stood, a silhouette in the dark, motionless, watching. To the left, a door stood shut, its surface covered in deep, jagged claw marks. The rusted lock had not turned in years, yet something heavy pressed against it from the other side. Faint whispers leaked through the cracks, a chorus of voices, too many to count. Further inside, an old mirror stood alone in the dim candlelight. The reflection was wrong. The room was empty. Yet, in the glass, a woman stood. Her hollow eyes stared directly forward, her mouth slightly open. She did not blink. She did not move. And then, she smiled. A floor above, behind the cracked glass of a second-story window, another figure stood. A woman in an old-fashioned dress. She did not move. She did not breathe. But her mouth parted slightly, whispering something only the wind could hear. The house itself breathed. The walls shuddered, and from the cracks, blackened, skeletal hands emerged, reaching outward, stretching, desperate to grab anything in their path. The candle on the wooden table flickered violently. Its glow cast shadows that should not have been there, distorted human-like shapes, twisting before melting into the walls. And the paintings, they had changed. The once serene faces of Victorian nobility had become something else. Silent screams, their expressions warped with agony. Their eyes, once lifeless paint, now burned with rage. In the dining room, the air stank of decay. The long table was covered in dust and cobwebs, its plates still set for a feast that had long since rotted away. At the head of the table, something sat. A skeletal figure, unmoving, its hollow eyes locked onto the doorway, waiting. A porcelain doll sat in the middle of the room, cracked. Its glassy eyes followed every movement, its lips parted as if whispering a secret only the dead could hear. A grandfather clock stood in the corner, its glass fractured, its wooden frame rotting with age. The hands were frozen at 3:33 a.m. The house was silent, and then tick, tick, tick. But the clock was broken. It should not have been ticking at all. The walls spoke next, faint writing carved deep into the old wood, words that should not have been there. "Get out." The letters glistened as if freshly written, while other older sentences bled into the background. "It watches. It knows you're here. You're not alone." From the darkness, eyes peered through the black void. Not one, not two, but many, watching, blinking, and then gone. The basement door was open now, just barely, a sliver of darkness beyond, thick and unnatural. The air grew colder, the sound of breathing, not from the viewer, but from below. At the end of the hallway she stood, a ghostly figure in a tattered white dress, her face blurred, flickering like a dying candle. She was not solid, not whole, but she was there. Beneath the bed, something moved. A hand, pale and clawed, inched forward, its long, cracked nails dragged against the wooden floor, scraping, reaching. Outside, the moon bled red, casting the mansion in a sickening glow. The trees leaned inward, their branches curling like fingers, as if the house itself had begun to breathe. A telephone rang. An old rotary phone, its cord unplugged. The sound was sharp, wrong. It rang again, and again, and again. The air around it rippled, as if reality itself had begun to tear. In the study, a journal lay open, its pages twisted, the ink shifting on its own. Words bled into one another, but one phrase remained clear. "You are not alone." A door creaked open, slowly. No one was on the other side, just emptiness. The sensation of being watched became unbearable, and then the ceiling moved. The shadows above crawled, merging into horrifying, contorted faces. They grinned. The final room held a mirror, a single reflection. The viewer stood alone, but behind them, a figure, blackened, grinning, watching. The lights flickered. The reflection blinked, but the viewer hadn't. It was just a dream.